In the last video, I looked at a wonderful attack played by Levon Aronian against Temur Radjabov. And after the game, Aronian said that he was inspired by a game that Spassky had won against Bronstein. And I've been meaning to look at this game for ages, particularly as it's a King's Gambit. And anyway, what's not to like about a game between Spassky and Bronstein, two of my chess heroes. So e5, played by Bronstein, why not? But later he said it was the devil who prompted me to reply e5. The fact that Spassky, like Spielmann in the last century, very much likes to play the King's Gambit had gone completely out of my head. Interesting, he might not have played e5 if he'd known Spassky would play the King's Gambit. Then again, I don't know. Anyway, that was Bronstein writing in 200 Open Games, a very fine book. So this game was played in the Soviet Championship in Leningrad in 1960. Actually, Spassky didn't have a great tournament. He finished somewhere in the middle. The tournament was actually won by Korchnoi, but that's another story. Anyway, this game, I should say, this spectacular game was actually featured in a modified version in the James Bond film From Russia with Love. So it's another little curiosity about this, well, this incredible game. So this is a pretty good system for black. Knight f6 is a good move here. I covered this on my DVD on the King's Gambit, and my recommendation was bishop c4, which is quite tricky. But Bronstein played bishop d6, and I'm just not sure about this move. I don't think it's that great. I mean, I think white can just play d4 and c4 here. But Spassky went knight c3, which is also okay. And then d4. Castles, and now bishop d3. So the bishop looks at h7, the bishop on this wonderful diagonal. And yes, this diagonal plays a key role in this game. Knight d7 from Bronstein, castles, and here Bronstein should just play knight f6. A simple move, and it's just a balanced position. Instead he played h6, and he said, I overdid things and spent a pointless tempo on this mysterious move. Yeah, well, as we'll see, once you play h6, that weakens, well, really all the squares on this diagonal, particularly g6 and h7. Knight e4, good move, swinging the knight over, but also making room for the c-pawn to advance. So basically, black has to take that. And Spassky advances anyway. The knight has to come in, and of course that's exchanged off. And now a very important move, c5. If bishop f4, then g3 is very unpleasant for black. So the bishop has to drop back to e7. And that basically just gets in the way of black's pieces. It's just not a good position. Blocks the queen, blocks the e-file, hampers the sort of free flow of black's pieces. But this is a really critical position, and Spassky said afterwards that this next move of his was the most difficult move of the game. So, what did Spassky play here? What do you play here with white? While you're thinking, I shall have a little slurp of tea out of my new mug. Oh yes, the Octopus Night mug has arrived. I'm really pleased with the design. I love it. It's really, really playful. Cheers. Available from teespring.com. Check out the link to the merch in the video description below. You can get t-shirts, you can get hoodies, different designs, split rooks, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, help support the channel. Advert over. Thank you. Now, what did he play? Well, I suppose the obvious move here is Queen e2, just to pick up that pawn. But then black has chances to break down the pawn on c5, but also play bishop b7 and bring that bishop into play. it's essential to try to develop an attack straight away to basically embroil black in complications on the king side before he has a chance to bring his queenside pieces into play. So bishop c2 with the idea, very simple and crude idea, of setting up a battery on this diagonal. I suppose the obvious move for black in this position is to play knight f6. But let's just see what happens. Queen d3. Let's say takes here. And if g6, knight e5, and you can see straight away how, you know, there are already potential threats on the g6 and f7 squares. And it'd be better if that pawn were on h7. That's what I mean by the weakened g6 square. Or if, let's say, pawn to b6, we'll play queen d3 again. So that diagonal has to be closed. And then queen takes pawn and white gains a tempo by attacking h6. So you can see that black king side is just a little bit sensitive. Okay, bishop c2 played, and Bronstein played rook e8, which is asking for it basically, because it leaves f7 unprotected, and when there's an open f file, and not to mention this diagonal as well, wow, that's risky. Queen d3 played, and I suspect, with obvious threats, I suspect that Bronstein had perhaps originally intended knight f8, covering h7, but then thought that, well, maybe white's attack is just too strong. You know, you can pick up that pawn really easily, knight e5. All white's pieces in play. These squares, very weak. It's good for white, basically. And if g6, closing that diagonal, then bishop b3. Now, this is a very common motif, that the bishop switches between these two diagonals in kingside attacks, and well, you can see that that queen on d3 is ready to potentially come in on g6, just as Aronian managed to achieve against Rajabov. And of course f7 is distinctly sensitive. So queen d3 played, and now instead of that knight f8, Bronstein decided to play e2, which basically he's just trying to deflect white, to disturb white's formation. And here, well, Spassky played in romantic style. At that time, well, he'd been coached by a Soviet player called Alexander Tolush, who was a very daring player and encouraged Spassky to play for the attack, to give up material. And that's what Spassky did here. In fact, he could just take that pawn and then resume the attack. It's very good for white. But he went for knight d6, a spectacular move, threatening queen h7 and mate shortly after. Okay, so how should black try to defend in this position? Not an easy one, and Bronstein got it wrong. Have a little think. I'll have a little slurp of tea. You have a little think. I don't want to cover up my beautiful design. In fact, listen, it's an octopus knight. It's appropriate. We've got an octopus knight on d6. He should play bishop takes knight. And this is simply unclear. Of course, it was possible to take on f1 before as well, but it would amount to the same thing. So at the moment, white is a rook down. And I think all we can say is that white has very good compensation here. White's going to take that knight, so he'll only be the exchange down. Black's king is not the most secure, but black does have chances to defend. It's very complicated. But after knight d6, in fact, Bronstein played knight f8 to cover h7. Knight takes pawn. Spassky crashed on. And Bronstein finally took that rook. Now, what happens on king takes knight? Let's just have a very quick look at that. It's going to be mate. Let's have a look. And a spectacular queen sacrifice here. Check. King goes in the corner. Knight g6. g8 covered by the bishop. Okay, back we go. It's actually really difficult for black now. If queen d5, then bishop b3, again switching that bishop to this diagonal, is very unpleasant. Bronstein decided to chuck some material back to gain some time for development. And now queen d7, of course, he's desperate to exchange queens, but Spassky just ducked that one. Queen f4. Bishop f6. Now, white to play. Knight e5. The knight number 2 is thrown into the scrum, and that's pretty unpleasant. If that one's taken, actually there's a curious echo here of another game. This didn't happen, by the way, but you can see that this is going to be fatal. A combination of checks here, rook f and knight g6. Well, it's gone basically. It's just winning for white. And this reminds me very much of a game, Fischer against Spassky from Reykjavik 72. I'm sure you know the game. Famous game, the Queen's Gambit, where Fischer was white and ended up in a very similar kind of situation actually with the bishop, queen, and rook. And Fischer had sacked in exchange, but it was a very nice attack. So let's go. Queen e7 was played. Bishop b3, there we go. This is really nasty. Check. And it's from here, roughly, that the game was used in the James Bond film. And I have to say, I've just looked at it again. You'll find the clip on YouTube. I think it's really well set, actually. It compares very favourably to the dramatisation on the Queen's Gambit. Really nicely staged. There's drama there. Nice crowd, nice setup. Looks good. And Bronstein, the Russian baddie, is smoking. Now that's very authentic. So check, king h7, and queen e4 check was the final move of the game. Okay, let's just finish it off. Let's see what could have happened. If g6, then, well, rook f7 does the job, winning the queen. And if king h8, let's finish with a checkmate. Rook takes, knight g6, check, king up, knight takes queen, and queen h7 mate. There we go. Beautiful stuff. So that was over in 23 moves. That's when Bronstein resigned. Brilliant, romantic play from Boris Spassky in the King's Gambit. Wonderful stuff. Don't forget, support the channel, buy some merch. You'll see the link down there. Enjoy your Octopus Knight and your split rooks and all that kind of stuff. New designs coming soon as well. And more games coming soon as well. Thanks for watching.